Every Pokemon move is special, but some moves are more special than others. Some of these moves are so special that they're custom made for one specific Pokemon, making those Pokemon stand out and giving you a reason to actually use them. But sometimes those moves just aren't worth it. So today I wanted to take a look at some of the abandoned signature moves and why they just aren't used. We won't be looking at signature moves on Pokemon that are just terrible and aren't used at all, so sorry Teatime Poltergeist. Instead, we'll be looking at Pokemon that are or have been somewhat relevant in Scarlet and Violet VGC. But first, what even is a signature move? Simply, it's a move that only that Pokemon is able to learn, or that its evolutionary line is able to learn. They've been around since the first generation of Pokemon, but they usually end up getting distributed to other Pokemon every now and again, or just straight up removed from the game. For example, in Generation 2, Substitute was the signature move of Mr. Mime, but now it's learned by just so many Pokemon. And Barrage had been the signature move of Executor from Generation 1 up to Generation 7, and it was removed from the game in Generation 8. Sometimes a move is signature just on a technicality. Confide is technically the signature move of Grimmsnarl in Scarlet and Violet, despite the move being in the game since Generation 6. But simply no other Pokemon is able to learn it by level up, and there's no TM for it in the game. But for the sake of this video, we won't be considering those technically signature moves. So let's get into the real list. With the release of Scarlet and Violet came the new Paldean forms of Tauros, and along with these new forms, all 4 Tauroses were given a signature move. Yes, it counts as a signature move because all 4 forms are considered the same Pokemon, despite the differences in move pool, stats, ability, typings, etc. Raging Bull is a physical normal type move, changes type based on the Tauros using it, being normal type for Kanto Tauros, fighting type for the Combat breed Tauros, water type for the Aqua breed, and fire type for the Blaze breed. It also deals a good amount of damage and can remove the effects of Light Screen, Reflect, and Aurora Veil, which makes it somewhat similar to the moves Brick Break and Psychic Fangs, although it does more damage than either of those. It also can't miss, which is a plus. So, why do none of the Tauroses use this signature move? There are just so many better options for each Tauros. Normal and Combat breed don't really see any use, but Blaze and Aqua breed saw some use early on in Regulation A, but also some niche uses in Regulation H. As an Intimidator, you can also threaten Incineroar. So why don't they use it? Because Flare Blitz and Wave Crash exists. These moves both have 120 base power, and they can't miss, while they deal 1/3 of the damage dealt in recoil to the user. That big burst in power is far more useful than being able to remove screens, because if your opponent isn't using those moves, then Raging Bull essentially doesn't do anything extra. If screens were more popular, then maybe Raging Bull would have seen a bit more use. But it's not what happened. Maybe in another format. Conversion and Conversion 2 are the signature moves of the Porygon line. And Porygon had another signature move called Sharpen, but then a few other Pokemon began to learn it, and eventually it was removed from the game anyways. So what did these two moves do? Well, both of these moves got reworked from their initial mechanics. Conversion used to change Porygon into the type of a target Pokemon. Then it changed Porygon into the type of a random move it knows, and now it changes Porygon into the type of the first move in its move slot. Well, if conversion is so good, how come there's no conversion 2, eh?
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Conversion 2 used to change Porygon into a random type that is either immune or resistant to the last move that hit it. But now it changes Porygon into a type that is either immune or resists the move the target Pokemon last used. Porygon 2 is the only one of the Porygons that is worth talking about in VGC, as it's one of the bulkiest Trick Room setters around, thanks to the Eviolite item. So it totally uses Conversion or Conversion 2 to make it tankier, right? Wrong. Porygon 2 basically had one moveset: Trick Room, Ice Beam, Recover, and Terra Blast, and with the various Terra types it would change between. All of these moves are pretty important to how Porygon 2 plays. So there's just no space for a gimmicky move like Conversion and Conversion 2. Base Form Typhlosion has never had a signature move. But when we go back in time to Hisui and Typhlosion was granted the Ghost typing and a new signature move to match it: Infernal Parade. I gotta say, that is such a cool name for a move, Infernal Parade. Fantastic name. This is a 60 base power special ghost move that has a 30% chance to burn the target, and if the target has a status condition, it doubles to 120 base power. This is remarkably similar to the move Hex. Hex is a little bit stronger at 65 base power, so it doubles to 130 base power when it hits a target that has a status condition, but it doesn't give the target one itself, so you commonly see it paired with the move Will-O-Wisp or less often Thunder Wave. But Hex is already not a popular move. It requires a lot of setup, which if you're unable to get it off, you're just stuck with a low power move. So most people just opt for the stronger Shadow Ball. And Infernal Parade is the exact same. It saves you a move slot since you don't need Hex and Will-O-Wisp, but you're rolling the dice on getting that 30% chance for a burn, and if you don't get it, you're hitting with a move weaker than Hex. Typhlosion also isn't the strongest Pokemon defensively, preferring to go fast and hard with either Choice Scarf or Choice Specs boosted eruptions and overheats, so it doesn't have time to try and get a burn with Infernal Parade. So it just runs Shadow Ball like basically every other ghost type. Twin Beam is the signature move of the Girafarig line, and is the most notable for you needing to have the move in order to evolve Girafarig into Farigiraf. It is a 40 base power Psychic type move that always hits twice, allowing Farigiraf to KO a Pokemon through a Focus Sash or deal damage after breaking a substitute. But every Farigiraf that won an official tournament since it's been legal did not run the move. Farigiraf normally isn't a Pokemon you're relying on to deal damage, and if you are, you're usually running moves like Hyper Voice and then Psychic, which deals more damage. For this Farigiraf, the niche of Twin Beam being able to break substitutes and then hit the opponent afterwards is pretty useless, since Hyper Voice, a sound move, bypasses substitutes anyways. Even when Farigiraf opts for a move other than Psychic, it's usually a move with more utility than Twin Beam. Spike Shot, which sits on the physical side, allowing Farigiraf to not get hardwalled by particularly specially defensive Pokemon. Expanding Force makes use of Psychic Terrain to hit both opponents and deal massive amounts of damage. Psychic Noise is another sound move that prevents the target from healing, turning off leftovers, grassy terrain, berries, the move Recover, Drain Punch, Draining Kiss, etc. Psyshock and Psychic Noise even do the same amount of damage as Twin Beam. Technically, Twin Beam does do a little bit more damage on each hit, as each hit can individually crit, so on average it will technically do slightly more damage if you get the double crit on each hit. Whatever. If Twin Beam had an additional benefit to it that made it stand out more, such as dealing more damage closer to Psychic, or dealing some sort of stat change, being able to drop special defense or special attack, then we might see Twin Beam a good bit more often. But for now, it just has too much competition. Lunar Dance has been the signature move of Cresselia since it was added in Generation 4. Cresselia has also won the World Championships 3 times and won 11 regional level events. All of those Cresselia have never used Lunar Dance. This is a Psychic type status move that knocks the users out, and then when a new Pokemon swaps in to replace it, it completely restores the health of that Pokemon, cures any status conditions it may have, and restores all the power points of its moves. This is remarkably similar to the move Healing Wish, a move that was added in the same generation. The only difference is that Healing Wish doesn't restore the PP of the swap Pokemon's moves. The problem with Lunar Dance is that Cresselia at its core is a bulky supportive Pokemon. It's built to sit on the battlefield and control the pace of battles with Icy Wind and Trick Room, disrupt with Skill Swap and Ally Swap, and boost its allies with Helping Hand. Lunar Dance knocking out Cresselia is completely contradictory to how it wants to play. And I guess the Pokemon Company agreed. For the Pokemon Legends Arceus, Cresselia was granted another signature move, Lunar Blessing, and this move is actually good. It heals Cresselia and its ally by 1/4 of their max HP, and cures any status conditions it might have. This new support tool in Cresselia's toolbox has seen immediate use in Gen 9 VGC. Lunar Dance continues to sit by and gather dust. Okay, first off, Victory Dance is a good move. While the other moves we've talked about so far have had just not been good enough to be used, Victory Dance is good. I go as far to call it a great move. It's the signature move of Hisuian Lilligant, and is a fighting type status move that raises the user's attack, defense, and speed. If you think that sounds familiar, that's because it should. It's basically the physical version of a bug type move, Quiver Dance, which boosts the special attack, special defense, and speed of the user. a move Unova Lilligant learns. If Victory Dance was able to be learned by any other Pokemon, it would be a busted move. So why is it just unused on Hisuian Lilligant? Well, both Lilligants are basically only seen on one type of team, Sun teams, where their Chlorophyll abilities allows them to double their speed in Sun, allowing them to use the move after use to cause the normally slow Pokemon Torkoal to use super fast eruptions, or to use the move Sleep Powder to put a Pokemon to sleep before they're even able to move. So with half of their moves devoted to status moves, people have had to drop Victory Dance in favor of actual attacks, normally close combat and Solar Blade. In single battles, after use worthless, so it's easier to drop that in favor of Victory Dance to boost up close combats and Leaf Blades. But in doubles, you just have stronger options for both fighting and grass types, so the only reason to use Lilligant is for its unique utility options. If Lilligant had access to the move Baton Pass to pass on those boosts, Victory Dance might have seen a bit more use in VGC. But it doesn't get Baton Pass, probably for a good reason. Alright, this move is a little bit weird. When Sun and Move came out, all the Alolan starters were given a signature move. Decidueye was given Spirit Shackle, which is still signature, but Decidueye sucks and isn't used at all. Marina was given the move Sparkling Aria, which now shares with Lapras as a Generation 8, so it's no longer signature. And Incineroar was given the move Darkest Lariat, an 85 base power, physical dark type move that ignores the target's defense and evasion boost. It saw some niche use in Generation 7, but was mostly dropped off in favor of Knockoff, a 65 base power dark type move that doubles in power if the target has a held item, and removes said item as well. The utility in removing an opponent's items is huge, and deals a big burst damage. But when we move on to Generation 8, that's when the story gets weird. Because in Generation 8, Incineroar lost access to Knockoff. But, so, Darkest Lariat became a TR, which was a special type of TM that Generation 8 did, they were weird, and was able to be learned by a lot of new Pokemon. The king of VGC's unused signature move was no longer signature, but in turn, it became the move that it used a good bit more often. Darkest Lariat was now in competition with other Dark-type moves of signature power and utility, not just the big damage of Knockoff. And it became a lot easier to justify using. Sure, you could use Throat Chomp to stop an opponent from using sound moves. Or you could use Darkest Lariat to get around and minimize spanning Pokemon, or Pokemon that's clicking Iron Defense to boost up a body press. When the 2022 Pokemon World Championships came around, Incineroar was on 7 of the top 8 teams, and while most players opted for Throat Chomp, James Beck, who got 3rd place, did run a Darkest Lariat Incineroar. And then Generation 9 came around. TRs disappeared, and Darkest Lariat once again became the signature move of Incineroar. But, once again, Incineroar gained access to Knockoff. And while some players have decided to use Darkest Lariat, at absolute best, it is a niche option, and at worst, it's an outright throw. Grimmsnarl has had 3 different signature moves since it was released in Generation 8. False Surrender, Spirit Break, and Confide. But like I said at the beginning, we're not going to be talking about technically signature moves like Confide. And Grimmsnarl now shares Spirit Break with the Paradox Pokemon Iron Valiant, so that leaves False Surrender. False Surrender is an 80 base power physical dark-type move that bypasses accuracy checks to always none. But that sounds familiar, well that's because in Generation 9, the newly released Kingambit also got a signature dark-type move, bypasses accuracy checks, and always hits. But it's 5 points stronger for some reason, so it's just strictly better. But why does Grimmsnarl not use False Surrender? Well, in addition to it being a literal war crime, Grimmsnarl just isn't focused on doing damage that often. Grimmsnarl has the Prankster ability, which gives its status moves +1 priority, allowing it to get off Thunder Waves before an opponent can move, or set up Light Screen and Reflect before an opponent can hit it. Allow it to pivot out with Parting Shot to lessen an opponent's offenses, Taunt to start an opponent's status's moves, Fake Tears to reduce an opponent's special defense, you get the point. But it can't just run all status moves, as if it's the last Pokemon left standing in a battle, it's always going to lose. And if it gets taunted, it'll be forced to struggle. So it needs at least one decent attack. So why not False Surrender? Well, because Spirit Break is just better. With all the disruption and utility Grimmsnarl is providing, having a decently strong move with just a solid secondary effect is a little bit more important than having a decently strong move with just hits. Spirit Break is a little weaker than False Surrender, It always reduces the target's special attack by 1 stage. Adding in Parting Shot and Light Screen, Grimmsnarl can protect its entire team against special attackers. So while False Surrender, which maybe sees some use on more offensive Pokemon, on a utility monster like Grimmsnarl, it just doesn't really do anything. Alright everyone, raise your hand if you know what the move Magic Powder does. If you raise your hands, I don't believe you. Magic Powder changes the target's type to pure Psychic. And I'm gonna be real, I'm really struggling to see any use for this move. It can remove the target's stab bonus from its moves. I guess if it's next to a Dark-type partner Pokemon, it can make the opposing Pokemon weak to its partner's moves. But it's also a powder move, a subcategory of moves like Sound, meaning that Grass types, or Pokemon with safety goggles, or the ability Overcoat, are just completely immune to the effects. So, why does Hatterene not use it? Because why would it? If you're faced off against a Hatterene before, you'll know that its #1 favorite move to click is Expanding Force, attempting to do massive Psychic-type damage to both of its opponents. So, if Hatterene turned an opponent into a Psychic-type with Magic Powder, best you can turn what would be an immune Dark-type Pokemon into a resisted Psychic-type. Also, Hatterene thrives in Trick Room, and the turns you have are precious. Wasting turns not taking KOs is antithetical to the playstyle. There are a couple of these type-changing signature moves, like Gorgai's Trick or Treat, or Trevenant's Forest Curse, and only Trick or Treat sees any use, as a Ghost type turning an opponent into a Ghost type so that it's weak to its stab moves, or turning an ally into a Ghost type to be immune to fighting or normal type moves is actually really solid. The Psychic type just doesn't grant any immunities to any of your allies, and its only resistances are to Psychic and Fighting. I just don't see any real use for it, and neither has anyone else. Okay, so I don't think I should even talk about this, but when you look at Koraidons who have won international tournaments, I thought it was worth mentioning. Koraidon's signature move is Collision Course, a physical fighting type move that has a base power of 100, but it increases to around 133 base power if it would be super effective against the target, which is a good move. Its twin Electro Drift, Miraidon's signature move, is exceptionally good and has been used on 98% of all Miraidons. So, why do only 2% of Miraidons drop Electro Drift, while a whopping 42% of Koraidons drop Collision Course? Well, it's because of the damage output. Miraidon's ability sets up Electric Terrain, which boosts Electro Drift by 30%, in addition to the boost Hadron Engine gives to Miraidon's special attack, and then the added stab bonus. Meanwhile, Koraidon's ability sets up the Sun, which boosts up Fire-type moves by 50%, but not the Fighting-type Collision Course. And as Koraidon is a physical attacker, it has to deal with Intimidate lowering its attack. To combat this, most Koraidon ran the Clear Amulet item, while Miraidon, a special attacker, it's just stacked up more damage multipliers with the Choice Specs item. But if you give Koraidon a Life Orb item, it can boost the power of its attacks by 30%. But now you're more vulnerable to Intimidate. But Collision Course gets a boost against the most popular Intimidator, Incineroar. If Incineroar ever terastallizes into a different type, suddenly your Collision Course just isn't that threatening. So some people began opting into Close Combat, which is just a flat 120 base power. It'll be less than Collision Course into a Dark or Steel types, but more damage into neutral hits. This Life Orb Close Combat Koraidon saw success at international level, with Wolf Glick winning with it at EUIC 2025, and Giovanna Shisuke winning at Worlds 2025. So while most Koraidons still use Collision Course, the fact that it only wins at the international level where Koraidon drops it for a close combat seemed worthy of noting. There are other signature moves that just don't see any use, but these were the ones I thought worthy of mentioning, as these Pokemon have actually seen play at high levels of competition. So if you're expecting to hear about why Weirdeer doesn't use Psyshield Bash, or why Reverum doesn't use Spin Out, that'll have to be for a different time. Perhaps when talking about signature moves that are just really bad. Anyways, thanks for watching. If you like these sorts of videos, consider subscribing or leaving a like. Or not, do what you want I guess, I won't force you.